Welcome to the statewide virtual training series, Title IV Part A, Subpart 1, Student Support and Academic Enrichment. The new Title IV Part A LEA Special Data Collection for Public Reporting 2022 through 2023. It is December 1, 2022. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas ESCs, LEAs, and participating private schools, and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The contents of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies within regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. The agenda is reporting requirements, TEA public reporting requirements, LEA reporting requirements, 2022 through 2023, and 2023 through 2024 at a glance for reporting requirements, the ESA Title IV Part A Grant Program, LEA considerations and next steps, support for assistance, and resources. As a reminder, the Title IV Part A program intent and purpose is to improve academic achievement of all students by increasing the capacity of LEAs, schools, and communities to provide all students with access to well-rounded education, improve school conditions for a safe and healthy student learning environment, which is also known as the Safe and Healthy Student Content Area, and improve technology for the enhancement of academic outcomes and digital literacy of all students. The importance of public reporting is that it meets federal requirements, it promotes LEA accountability, it guides the LEA in stakeholder priorities and decision making, informs decision makers and the public, and it complements formal evaluation efforts. TEA is required to publicly report how the LEA's Title IV Part A funds are being expended per content areas by federal fiscal year, and the degree to which LEAs have made progress toward meeting the Title IV Part A objectives and outcomes. An LEA is required to annually provide a description of the Title IV Part A activities, programs, objectives, and intended outcomes, a description of how the LEA will periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the Title IV Part A activities and programs, and the LEA must assure annually how funds are being used to meet the Title IV Part A content areas. You may see additional information regarding these requirements in the ESA statute section 4106E1E. For the current school year, TEA will not collect expenditures by service and content area on the Title IV Part A Compliance Report Schedule PR 3107. Currently, we have been receiving the expenditures by service and content area and then publicly reporting the 15-month reporting cycle. This is how the PR 3107 Part 3 looked for this past school year. Under expenditures and uses of funds, we had the service and the activities to support well-rounded educational opportunities, activities to support safe and healthy students, activities to support effective use of technology, technology infrastructure, and administration. The district was to input the expenditures per content or service area. The USDE requirement is requesting data to be reported by federal fiscal year period of performance, which is July 1 through September 30th, a 27-month reporting cycle. The current TEA practices, we have the LEAs maintain documentation locally, such as the description of Title IV Part A activities, programs, objectives, and intended outcomes, description of how the LEA will periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the Title IV Part A activities and programs, and the description of the progress made toward meeting the program objectives and measurable outcomes. TEA is currently not publicly reporting on the degree to which LEAs have made progress toward meeting the program objectives and measurable outcomes. The USDE requirements now are to publicly report the degree to which the LEAs have made progress toward meeting the program objectives and measurable intended outcomes. The type of Title IV Part 8 data are the content service and content areas, current year expenditures, carryover expenditures from the prior grant year. The LEA annual progress includes the Title IV Part A objectives and measurable outcomes, and a reporting cycle of 27 months. The Title IV Part A special data collection for 22-23 will be collected through the TEA Federal Program Compliant FBPC Compliance Work App. The submission requirements for July 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2024 is the USDE's 27th month performance period. During this time, LEAs will be required to submit 2 Title IV Part A program objectives and measurable outcomes for the current year, established through stakeholder consultations. They are to indicate the content areas per objective and measurable outcome. The LEA Work App report opens January 17, 2023 and closes on March 16, 2023. These are the tentative dates for the Work App. If there is 100% REAP transferability option used for the Title IV grant, there will be no required LEA reporting. If no carryover, the LEA will report the data once. The Title IV Part A special collection method will report the LEA will report the initial progress toward those 2 Title IV Part A objectives and measurable outcomes reported for the current year. The Work App to report this information will open on October 1, 2023 through December 1, 2023. That is when the LEA will report the initial progress toward meeting those objectives and measurable outcomes that were submitted earlier in the school year. The Title IV Part A special collection method submission requirements for October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. If there is LEA carryover funds from 22-23 to 23-24, the LEA will report the final progress toward the 2 Title IV Part A objectives and measurable outcomes reported for the current year. If there are no LEA carryover funds from 22 through 23 to 23 through 24, the initial progress submitted on December 1st, 2023 will be what's publicly reported. The work app for this section opens October 1, 2024 and closes December 1, 2024. For the 22-23 current year expenditures, the LEA will report the service and content areas. TEA will discontinue only the expenditures data collection in the current PR 3107 and collect it through the Special Collection Work App. So for the Title IV Part A grant carryover expenditures 21-22, it will be reported by service and content areas. The work app will open October 1st, 2023 and close December 1st, 2023. Now we'll look at a glance at 22-23 and 23-24 reporting requirements. For the 22-23 Title IV Part A funds, the current year grant is July 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. The Title IV Part A program objectives and measurable outcomes, the LEA will be establishing those objectives and measurable outcomes and will report it in the first phase of January 17th, 2023 through March 17th, 2023 and report those TEA2 Title IV Part A objectives and measurable outcomes. The LEA will be monitoring the objectives and measurable outcomes and the progress locally during that grant year. And then a special collection will open October 1, 2023 through December 1, 2023. It will report the initial progress to the TEA on the 2 objectives and measurable outcomes reported earlier in the school year. The progress reporting options will be for the initial and final phase, no to limited measurable progress was made, some measurable progress was made, substantial progress was made, or outcomes were met. During the January 23 through March 23 collection, the LEA will be asked, did it expend all funds during the current grant period? If yes, the LEA progress reporting is complete for 22 through 23. If they did not expend all grant funds, Title IV funds will be carried over into 23-24, so the LEA will need to report on the progress during the carryover period. The carryover period for these funds will be October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. During that time, the LEA will monitor objectives and measurable outcomes and progress locally. When the special collection opens October 2024 through December 2024, the LEA will report the final progress on the 2 objectives and measurable outcomes. The TEA public reporting for 22 through 23 will be published on the TEA Title IV Part A webpage no later than January 30th, 2025, which is after the 27th-month federal fiscal year. For the 23-24 school year, the current year grant funds are July 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. During that time, the LEA will establish the 23-24 program objectives and measurable outcomes. When the special collection opens October 1, 2023 through December 1, 2023, The LEA will report the 2 Title IV Part A objectives and measurable outcomes for this school year, monitor those objectives and measurable outcomes and the progress locally, and then when the special collection opens again in October 2024, the LEA will report the initial progress to those 2 objectives and measurable outcomes. Again, if there are any carryover funds, the LEA will monitor those objectives and measurable outcomes and the progress locally through October 1, 2024 through September 30th, 2025, and report it once the Title IV Part A special collection opens for carryover in October 1, 2025. They will report the final progress on those 2 objectives and measurable outcomes. TEA will publicly report for each LEA the 2 program objectives and measurable outcomes and the progress made. Report will be published on the TEA Title IV Part A webpage by January 30th, 2026. Now we're going to turn to the Title IV Part A expenditures. The expenditures for the 22-23 school year is for July 2022 through September 30th of 2023. That is the federal fiscal year. During that time, the LEA is working on the planned uses of funds by services and/or content area that is reported on the ESA Consolidated Application, which is the PS 3107 schedule. It is to monitor the current year expenditures locally. And then once the Title IV Part A special collection opens in October of 2023, the LEA will report the current year expenditures by service content areas. If the LEA expended all funds during the current school year, during the current grant year, if it did, then the LEA expenditures reporting by service and content area is complete for the 22-23 school year. However, if the LEA did not expend all funds during the current grant period, Title IV-A funds will be carried over until 23-24, and the LEA will need to report on those expenditures by service and/or content area during the carryover period. The carryover grant funds would be used during October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. During that time, the LEA will monitor carryover expenditures locally and track carryover expenditures separately. The special collection will open once again in October of 2024 through December 2024, and the LEA will report carryover expenditures by service and content area for the 2022-2023 grant funds. TEA will publicly report aggregate statewide use of funds expenditures by content area for the 22-23 Title IV Part A funds on or by January 30th, 2025. When we look at the 2023-2024 Title IV Part A funds, that grant year for expenditures would start July 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. During that time, the LEA will report their planned uses of funds by services, content areas reported on the ESA Consolidated Application PS 3107, which is the Title IV application schedule. The LEA will monitor current year expenditures locally and then report when the special collection opens October 1, 2024 through December 2024, the current year expenditures by service and/or content areas. The carryover grant funds would be used during October 2024 through September 30th, 2025. During that time, the LEA is to monitor carryover expenditures locally and track carryover expenditures separately from the regular funds of 23-24. The 24 The Title IV Part A special collection will open in October 2025 through December 2025. During that time, the LEA will report the carryover expenditures which were tracked separately by service and/or content areas. For the 23-24 Title IV Part A expenditures, TEA will publicly report the aggregate statewide use of those funds expenditures by content area, and it will be published on or before January 30th, 2026. The ESA Title IV Part A Federal Grant Program. The ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. Here is a snapshot of what that page looks like, which is the PS 3107 Title IV Part A schedule. As you can see in Part 1C, it lists the services and/or content areas in which the LEA would indicate the amount budgeted for each of those areas. Additional information may be found in the Title IV Part A Program Guidelines under Requirements 9 through 10. And it states, description of program objectives and intended outcomes for Title IV Part A activities. The LEA must report that information. More information regarding the program objectives and intended outcomes may be found in the program guidelines. The LEA is also to periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the Title IV Part A program activities that are carried out to support those program objectives and the intended outcomes. LEAs must keep the most recent description of the process to evaluate the effectiveness of the Title IV Part A funded activities aligned to program objectives and intended outcomes. And the LEA keeps annual documentation and results of program effectiveness to show that it is meeting its Title IV Part A objectives and outcomes. The ESA program-specific and ESA provisions and assurances provide additional information about this requirement on number 11, page 45. And it states, the LEA will maintain a description of the activities, program objectives, and intended outcomes for activities, and how the LEA will periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the activities based on such objectives and outcomes. There are some things for the LEA to consider and next steps as they plan for spending the Title IV Part A funds. First, the LEA should think about what type of self-assessment or process is in place to guide stakeholder discussions during development of the LEA's Title IV Part A program objectives and measurable outcomes. Does the LEA feel confident it could justify and sufficiently document its use of Title IV Part A funds for data-supported program objectives and outcomes to TEA, the U.S. Department of Education, and auditors if selected for monitoring? Are there any LEA budgetary tracking and/or program reporting adjustments needed to meet federal requirements for submission of its TEA Title IV Part A special data collection? How is the LEA tracking progress on its Title IV Part A program objectives and measurable outcomes. And most importantly, would local and state news media agree that the district selected program objectives and measurable outcomes that best support the Title IV Part A allowable activities for its district, its school, its students, and its staff and community? These are items in which the LEA should consider as they're trying to make next steps in planning for their Title IV Part A allowable activities and programs. As you think of what you need to do to support your Title IV programs and activities, there are several ways in which the LEA may receive support. The first way to receive support is through the TEA Title IV Part A webpage resources. We have several resources available. We have updated Title IV Part A frequently asked questions, a program guide, a use of funds one-pager, a school safety initiative webpage that would help our district in looking at what is state required as well as what is federally required. And then we also have additional webinar resources. The LEA may also receive services from the Educational Service Center through the ESA Basic Services Initiative grant that the ESC staff receive to provide additional training to LEAs in the three content areas: the comprehensive needs assessment and private school equitable services under the Title IV Part A program. You can see listed additional areas in which the ESC staff can provide technical assistance and support, such as use of funds, compliance requirements, the ESA consolidated grant application, providing support for the LEAs in the area of random validations, persistently dangerous schools, ESA consolidated compliance reports, among other items. In addition, the Title IV Part A information is disseminated from ESC Service Center staff, and you may see a map of our ESC service centers and where they are located, regions 1 through 20. In addition, there are other upcoming resources, such as the Guidance Handbook that will help LEAs with the special data collection for public reporting. It will share the statutory requirements, a data collection timeline, as well as instructions for submitting the data through the Work app. There's also online training resources that will be available, such as a voiced over PowerPoint video, training slides, and frequently asked questions. If you have additional questions and you would like to contact TEA, you may contact the Federal Program Compliance Division, Lenitra Guess, the Title IV Part A Program Director, by email or by phone. Thank you for attending the session. If there are any questions following this session, feel free to reach out to your local Education Service Center staff or the TEA staff. Thank you and have a wonderful day.